Nachos amigos, and welcome to Record Breakers, a music podcast where a group of friends gather together to share music with each other, an album at a time. It's like a little book club for music. Fun time had by all. I'm PD Rave, your man with no plan, and here with me is my team, my squad, my crew, my gang, my quorum. We've got David.
Wake up, Kang! Stop eating corn.
Yes. We've got Drew.
Don't eat grass.
Mm-hmm. And of course, last but not least, the occupant of our rotating fourth chair for this set of episodes, the one, the only, Bryce.
Hi, I'm happy to be back. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. We're here, we're having fun, we're here to talk about music, we're here to talk about an album, and the provider of this album is Cleveland's owned, or generally Cleveland adjacent, Cleveland attached.
The NEO area's own.
Yes. Drew, what do you got for us this week?
Well, we're the reason that is funny is we are grabbing somebody from my lovely home state of Ohio and somebody from my area of Ohio. Cleveland rapper, actor, stoner, as he likes to call himself, Kid Cudi, with the debut full length. He did a mixtape before this that garnered a lot of popularity and turned some heads, including some people that were on this record. But the first full-length debut, which was Man on the Moon, with Man on the Moon, The End of Day, started a little bit of a trilogy.
Mm-hmm. David, what were your expectations coming into this album?
I really had no expectations at all. I'm coming into this completely blind. Kid Cudi, for whatever reason, has just not shown up in my listening consciousness. I'm aware of who he is and I'm aware of his popularity, but he just was never someone that came up in my playlist at all.
Mm-hmm. Bryce, what expectations did you have coming into this album?
I only know Kid Cudi from two things. One of his early singles, "Embrace the Martian," which is a very catchy, very fun kind of pop hip hop track. And then having seen him partially on the comedy Bang Bang TV show as a temporary band leader for their faux talk show. So I don't know. I'd always had this image of him as being a very like introspective, a lyrics rapper, a rapper who you really wanted to hear the story that he had to tell. And so that was at least a little bit of the bias that I brought into Man on the Moon.
Kid Cudi was a name I knew, and like a couple, I knew a couple of songs, primarily a couple of songs that we're going to talk about on this album. That were kind of the big hits. But I had some general idea of the style of hip hop that we're going with, and it was probably, I was looking forward to it, but I had no assumptions of exactly what we were going to get with this record in particular. So I was looking forward to going on the ride, going with the man on the moon, going to space time. Drew.
Yeah.
Drew, how would you describe this album music?
This album, it's funny you mentioned space just because of all the psychedelia that he gets into, especially in like the third act of this album. Like a lot of artists from my neck of the woods, Akron, Cleveland area, I have a very soft spot for this album in general, for a number of reasons, not just that it's like, oh, hey, this dude is like doing cool shit. And like, I know the things he's referencing because I've been down those roads. But also it's a rap concept album, which I've said before, like, aren't a huge thing, but they're becoming more and more of a thing. And I always dig them when they happen. and telling this sort of like semi-autobiographical story of kind of like Because the Internet did, where it's somebody looking in on their own story and their own life and like sort of piecing things together and then embellishing in other places. I think is really cool. There is a lot of substance abuse dealt with in this album lyrically. Bryce mentioned that the reputation that Kid Cudi has is that there is a very lyrics focus in his stuff. And while that is true, what I also tend to like about him is that he doesn't get too heady. Sometimes you have a thing where, and I like this type of rap too. I'm a Killer Mike fan. So like the sort of going nerdy and heady is a cool space to be in. But he doesn't do that. He very much consciously tries to sound like he would talk normally. And because of that, he just sounds like another dude from around my way. But he's telling these stories in a way that I think makes sense. And is cool to hear. There is a lot of dealing, like I said, with substance abuse and depression and anxiety. Maybe that's part of why I have a soft spot for this record as well. But it's something that you can hear it in the sound. This album was made between like 2007, 2008, and then it dropped early 2009, if memory serves me correctly. And guys like names like Common and Drake and Kanye West were some of the first people that had heard Kid Cudi and was like, we should work with this dude. Like, this dude is doing something cool. And you can hear this era, like the 808s era of Kanye all over this. But instead of relying on like an auto-tune feel to give a spacey sort of sound to it, there is a lot of crazy like psychedelia synth work that goes on, and makes this very moody at times, but being able to work in that ebb and flow of like a 3-act story, which I think is really cool.
David, how would you describe this album musically?
I would describe this album as a very natural progression from what we heard from the quote-unquote old Kanye. This is what the old Kanye influenced, and Kid Cudi himself has influenced a lot of rappers after him, for good or for ill. But you hear a guy that is introspective, but also is talented lyrically. At the same time, it is his debut album, so there are some things, a few critiques that I have that I'm willing to let slide since it is his first album and he probably didn't have unlimited resources for it. But keep in mind with some things that this was his debut album, and everybody's first album gets a pass one way or another for certain things.
Bryce, how would you describe this album musically? Oh, you got muted.
I like the description that this is kind of an extension of old Kanye sound, because it really does feel like you do feel kind of that sort of that lightness that hip hop had at around that time, a kind of airiness to it, that kind of just, I don't know, tonally feels through a lot of this album, and I would say that like the big thing that struck me as listening to it was how much material felt at least partially radio ready. You know, there's a lot of like good songs, and like all of the songs really flow into each other. It's not just like this is the album and here are 13 tracks, and also you can definitely tell what the 2 popular songs are. Like, you know, and I think some of that helps by doing alternate versions of Day and Night and Pursuit of Happiness, where you feel you feel like you are on this concept that Cudi is talking about of loneliness and of growth, coming of age. And so it all gels. It feels almost like a score a little bit. You almost kind of, because it is so heavily invested in having this concept, you almost feel like, okay, I'm like really linearly like traveling and following along with the vocalist, and it's just really cool. I don't like it. It just sounds of the time, but not dated.
Yeah, of the time, but not dated is a good way to put it. It's of that style. You can see where like that little, he got brought into that little group of, Kanye and Common and Chicago. It's almost like he got adopted by the Chicago rappers. Like they came over and just like took him.
Sometimes like Midwest stick together, man.
Yeah, damn right we do.
Yeah.
I was actually going to mention, like, if you listen to like Chicago rappers and Detroit rappers and Cleveland rappers, there's a lot of like working in the same milieu. And I feel like it's a very like Midwest centric sort of feel at times, which I like.
Yeah, a lot of times that cultural exchange doesn't happen literally like on neat political borders. It's usually just a migratory swath with that stuff, and that makes sense because it definitely is of the you can hear like that style. You can hear little moments where he gets Bone Thugsy if you want to, he gets bony if you want to put it that way, of and/or harmony, and it works really well, and it's the concept of kind of like the spaciness and the vastness that works really well, and just good cool hip-hop tracks, good cool 2000s hip-hop track, like it is that decade of hip-hop is one that I think probably one of the most and biggest influences on like how I view hip hop, both in from these rappers and from more underground rappers. It's like one of my favorite albums of all time is The Mouse and the Mask by Danger Doom, which is very much of like that particular era. And yeah, this is a nice example of that, and I hadn't realized that this was going to be the album with those songs, and when they came up, for some reason I thought it was going to be like, oh, this is later when he got experiment. It's funny because like I had this assumption, because like it's almost like this assumption of like when artist does things just like regular songs and regular music, gets big, and then later on after being big gets experimental, and starts to really create concept stuff. So for some reason I had this idea, oh yeah, this is like, after he was big, like, and for some reason I hadn't remembered that this is the album, and it's like, oh, and for some reason even when the Day and Night was playing, I was like, is this like a revisit of Day and Night that he did later on? It was like, oh no, this is Day and Night, and this is the album it came from. Oh, okay. But it was still a really cool experience, and it's the beats are fantastic. The beats kind of like play around with like using indie tracks from the time, and using independent indie artists, like indie pop artists, that are kind of even feature on this track. We'll talk about those specific tracks, and even using like sampling pop songs, and the instrumentation is really tight and really interesting, and the lyrical work is fantastic. But yeah, let's drill down to some of the key tracks. Drew, what would be some of the key tracks that you would zero in on?
Well, I'm going to do the thing I sometimes do, which is list off way too much, because this is one of those albums for me. In My Dreams, starting with a slow, like a slower song to draw you in, a tone that feels nostalgic at times. It almost does puts me in the same headspace as like a vaporwave track might, with like the what's the term? Trying to think of the term I've heard before. The hypnagogic, I believe, is the correct term. Could be wrong there. But like that sort of almost nostalgic, rose tinted but skewed aspect. Soundtrack to My Life is one of my favorite rap songs of all time. It just is, for not only the subject matter that it deals with and how it chooses to deal with it. I think a lot in like this era and before in rap, you have a lot of like machismo, a lot of bravado, like a lot of like chest puffing, like I am awesome. And this is not that. It's like, hey, I am like self-medicating to deal with like parts of me that I don't necessarily like a lot, and that sucks, but like it's kind of what life is. Like this is the real life. And I feel like hip hop in the late 90s to early 2000s got away from that. You had like a lot of party stuff from like Master P's and Ludacris's, whereas like in the early 90s you had like a lot of politically charged stuff. And I think this, you started to see like a paradigm shift to talking about things that might be a little more personal. On top of that, you also have Solo Dolo starting off the second act with like this music that's like almost an allusion to horror movies in ways, with how the tone and the beat to it and stuff like that feels very like Nightmare on Elm Street to me in ways. But then also like is lyrically sort of dark and dense, as dense as this album gets. Like I said, he tries not to be super dense and tries to speak very plainly on purpose. But this one also does the thing that I love on concept albums, where the story that's being told and the audio that you're hearing paint this very clear picture. We've touched on it, but Day and Night is one of those songs that it's another sad song, but somehow is like super catchy and like fun at times. And it's an easy single. It's an easy, memorable track, even though it does go places and it's weird. And then we've mentioned Old Kanye, and Old Kanye is on the record with Make Her Say. The sample is great. It's a danceable fucking 808 beat. Like, what are you going to do? Like, it's great. It's a good song. So
yeah. David, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
I gave the singles a listen, Soundtrack to My Life and Day and Night. The thing that I kept going back to is the choruses for these songs probably would have hit a little stronger, and these songs probably would have been a lot more explosive if there was a different vocalist. I understand that with this subgenre in hip hop, there's a lot of MCs that are doing their own singing and doing their own vocalizing, but I don't think that worked here. I liked that Soundtrack to My Life was definitely a genuinely good track. Sky Might Fall, in the latter half of the album, track 8, was the first song on the album that really, really clicked. It had a consistency and a really strong hook that I really enjoyed. I'm going to talk about really the second half of the album from track 8 onward, but I'll also mention specifically the track Alive Nightmare. But for me, the second half of the album, starting with track 8, Sky Might Fall, was pretty strong.
Mm-hmm. Bryce, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
I think the doing these alternate versions on Day and Night and Pursuit of Happiness takes them out of the very like structured radio format that they found a lot of success in, and really brings it into the aesthetic of what this album is trying to do. So I think those are very certainly very successful, and I think they're very interesting versions of those, even if you are someone who like is in love with the radio version of Day and Night or Pursuit of Happiness. Like you will listen to those and you will I would think that they are better like this on this album than if they were the original versions. Make Her Say is really clever, using the poker face, and not just a poker face sample, but like a very specific live performance that is also kind of a more known version of that, is really clever. And that's one where the sample almost feels a little like shock value, almost like, oh, they sampled Lady Gaga. Like you almost feel like it's like meant to be a headline, but it feels really really in place. The other one that I really enjoyed near the end of the album was track 14, Higher, with Chip the Ripper, excuse me. I thought that was a nice way to kind of round out the plot of the story of I don't know, someone who has kind of reborn, who's refound themselves, and so I think that that's a great kind of way to start to really complete the circle on the story here. So those are some of my favorites.
Yeah, if we were to zero in on stuff like you guys have pretty much touched on a lot of the stuff. I would say, yeah, like Heart of a Lion, Kid Cudi theme music is a solid track. Day and Night, this kind of like album version of the song is tight and really nice, and kind of like Bryce said, kind of like a nice a nice like new view of the same song. Alive Nightmare, hearing Rat-a-tat randomly on a hip hop record is just, it's just a wild and out there.
You're welcome.
Fucking Rat-a-tat, all these motherfuckers. Great group. Make Her Say, I love that, this whole introspective record, and then the song with the Lady Gaga sample, talk about blowjobs. It's you can't be mad at it. You can't really be mad at it. Pursuit of Happiness, again, this one, not only Rat-a-tat, but you got MGMT showing up at the party. That's just like the
peak MGMT too.
Yes.
Fucking.
This is like
up there.
This is their era. Like
Yeah.
It's just late 2000s indie like music, just like
before MGMT became the stereotype of MGMT themselves somehow.
Yes. Yes. But yeah, it is wild to see them there. I also like like I said, Higher, just nice little like chill weed song, weed and drug song. It's just like, hey, I'm gonna get higher.
I think this guy smokes marijuana, guys.
He does the marijuana. Also, I didn't notice that I was listening to the deluxe version the whole time, and I like the deluxe tracks. TGIF was a cool track, and Is There Any Love as like the one that ended up being my closer, because I kept listening to the deluxe version with Wale. Was a cool like little like addition to the album, even though we're not officially reviewing those. Those are nice tracks. But yeah, let's bring it back around the horn and talk about some conclusive thoughts. David, how would you conclude on this album as a whole?
I felt like the latter half of the album was much, much stronger than the first half. The first half of the album was a bit flat for me. Maybe it was a little too much of the what is known as sad boy hip hop.
Yeah.
Maybe there was just a little too much of that for me on the first half of this album. But overall, it was produced well. I think for a lot of things that I didn't like how the hooks may have been performed better with a different vocalist, I can let a lot of that slide because this was his first album. I think overall it was a solid effort for a first album. I can't say there were songs that I didn't like, but I can't say I loved this album. I imagine he's done better things after this. You could really see that there's a lot of really creative and really inventive stuff all over this album, and he's got a lot of really good creative ideas and the ways to make them happen, and he's able to flow over a lot of interesting beats. So I'm glad that this was a sign of things to come for him. I would say that I would recommend the second half of this album. The first,
And as a side note, as far as getting other people on the hook, the features in the next album include CeeLo Green and Mary J. Blige. So,
never heard of any of those people.
Oh yeah, no, they're not.
Yeah,
They're not literally the people you want to call. They're fucking hip hop.
Exactly. Bryce, what would be your conclusion on this album as a whole?
I walked away from this album with almost a feeling of and if this is not too heavy, but like almost a little bit of kinship with Cudi. I felt like only having known him from TV and hit songs, I really enjoyed the experience of going and hearing what he has to say and the arc that he wants to portray on the End of Day. And I really don't have too much more to say other than I think it is really, really successful at what it's trying to do. And I would like to go back to this album again because I think there's a lot to kind of chew on in terms of looking at subtext. But then also there are 2 sequel albums to this that also who knows how they expand in the story of Cudi or whoever the person Cudi is trying to represent on the album. And so I guess conclusively, I feel like my expectation that Cudi is kind of an introspective lyrical artist is like fulfilled. Like it came to life. Like, yeah, he it's like you were saying earlier, like it's not trying to be complicated. It's not trying to be a big labyrinth. It's just when you have someone just telling you their emotions and telling you what they feel and telling you how they are reacting to things, that's not always a given. That's kind of difficult. And I really appreciate the vulnerability that's on display here.
Yeah, this is a great jumping off point. This is a great calling card album. There's a lot of this, so you can see the influence in that he brought to the game, as it were, to the hip hop game. Bringing his introspective raps, bringing kind of like mental health talks into the world of hip hop. There's a lot of quality lyrical work here, a lot of quality flow. It is fair to say that his singing isn't as solid or high skilled as you would like, but I didn't mind it. But yeah, hearing that going to like, okay, next time he brings in Mary J. Blige, he brings in CeeLo Green, he brings Saint Vincent on the freaking album. That's
Kid Cudi has a lot of weird inspirations.
Yeah.
I respect that. I respect the hell out of that.
St. Vincent, known Fortnite player. Yeah, it's good. It really showcases a really cool musical style, musical milieu, and musical like identity and flow, and I think it's a good starting off point, and I'm gonna have to set aside time to even on my own kind of like get into the rest of the trilogy if nothing else, the other two albums of the trilogy, and dive into that, see how things grow, because the third album was a couple years ago. Yeah. But yeah, last but not least,
between 2 and 3, he took a bit of a break.
Yeah. Drew, how would you conclude on this album as a whole?
We've sometimes had a joke on this show that there are albums that you kind of are doing your homework a little bit. There are albums that might mean something to music as a whole or to the genre that they work in, but they might not be the best records. They might not be the most fun to listen to. This record is one of those records where I feel like it's a bit of homework. If you like what Childish Gambino does, if you like what Logic does, if you like what Travis Scott does musically, maybe not what he does during concerts. If you, even if you like Lil Yachty or any of, like David said, the sad boy hip hop in a way, then a lot of that is coming from Kid Cudi being vulnerable in a lot of ways, but also like I said, the vulnerability comes from some of his different inspirations. You have these indie artists and these alternative artists that, like, in the like emo indie scene, that like that's what they do. They wear their hearts on their sleeve. And I think this was a big kicking off point for that. It's from a guy from my neck of the woods, and it's like Bone Thugs and Harmony did it early 90s, and then Homie does it in 2008, where it's like gonna put something into hip hop and it's going to shift the viewpoint of like what you could do in the genre. Makes me a little proud to be from Ohio when stuff like this comes out. Yeah. But it's also one of those albums where, like I said, Soundtrack to My Life is still like, it's up there with like KRS-One tracks and stuff being like things I will throw on any hip hop playlist. Mm-hmm. Like it's that Day and Night Solo Dolo. It's stuff that like just works on so many different levels and with so many different sounds that it's just a fun listen.
Yeah, the one I would say, unlike Bone Thugs and Harmony, this one doesn't have obscure fighting game samples.
Fair.
Their producer had a copy of Eternal Champions sitting around. That's still the wildest thing. It's just like more than one track on the like Eternal Champions of all game. But never.
Hip hop has some of the weirdest video game pulls sometimes, even in like not nerdcore hip hop. It's like, wait, why am I hearing this like random?
Because you can only sample Mega Man so many times, people.
Exactly.
Why am I hearing
tell me I'm wrong?
Sample over
sometimes I'm wrong.
Sometimes, Mom doesn't know what game you wanted her to bring from the store. Sometimes, and you know what? You are not going to ask for another one because you ain't got a lot of money for games, and if you ask for a game, you just get your ass whooped. That's just I can tell you that as somebody who grew up in the hood, like in a different hood, but in the hood nonetheless, you just accept whatever games you get.
Was very happy with my Sega Genesis. Sometimes you have fucking. What's that Castles games? The Crystal, no, not Crystal Castles. Are you talking about the 3DO?
No, on
Because if you
NES.
are, we should just move on and get to the conclusive thoughts.
Bugs Bunny's Crazy Castle?
The Encarta game, the Encarta trivia game.
It was like a. Well, anyways, what was it? But sometimes you have fucking Friday the 13th. And sometimes your friend comes over and you're excited to play the Friday the 13th game because that's what you have. Like, or you have Secret Service on the NES, like fucking playing submarine games. Go boom, boom. Watch this torpedo go like the speed of smell. All right, those are our thoughts on Kid Cudi's Man on the Moon. End of day. Now we get to the main event of the evening, the moment we've all been waiting for, our haiku reviews. We sum it all up in poetic form, the 575. Let's do it. Let's get down to nitty gritty. Haiku numero uno. David, what is your haiku?
A strong second half. It's heart on its sleeve hip hop. Wasn't moved. It's fine.
Mm-hmm. Bryce, what is your haiku?
A man on the moon, starting anew, hopefully. Hope he found his peace.
Mm-hmm. My haiku, introspective bops, solid rhymes and catchy tunes. Congrats, Cleveland. Yay. Drew, what is your haiku?
The kid from Cleveland debuts the trilogy of The Look at Himself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are our thoughts on Kid Cudi's The Man on the Moon, The End of Day. You can of course find it on our Spotify playlist. Play Record Breakers, a home game. Do your due diligence and your due diligence. There's two playlists. One with the episode slotted in, one without. Check them out all in our show notes at rebelly.net. So for the links, or in the description of the YouTube video. On those Spotify playlists will be next week's record. And it's finally time for Bryce's turn. Bryce, what have you got for us?
I've been thinking about it a lot. I've been on the past few weeks, and I was a little unsure. I like a lot of Japanese music, and I want to make sure that I give you guys something good, even if maybe you don't immediately understand the lyrics. But I have something that
No, don't worry
me off. Jesus.
Don't worry. You have all the time in the world. I can always edit it out.
So this album's been really special to me lately because I've really been getting into this artist, especially from this era. And this is a special album because it's a bit of a turning point from writing about a lot of loneliness and sadness and depression into hope and peace and trying to, make the world a better place. On top of that, this is her first album where almost every track on it she wrote and composed. It didn't arrange, but composed it, and I think that really makes it something special. So I am bringing the Ayumi Hamasaki album I Am to Record Breakers.
Yes, Ayumi Hamasaki. That is a name I've heard of, oddly enough, in various circles.
You'll hear she's got this one's got one of her big songs on it, so you might know some of these songs.
Look forward to checking this out. But yeah, that'll be next time. This is this week. And you can of course find us all over the internet. David is at Call Me DJM, Drew is at X, Bryce is at Brycast, I'm at PD Rave. The show's at 4 Record Breakers. That's the number 4 Record Breakers. RecordBreakersPodcast.com, RecordBreakersPodcast@gmail.com, Rebelly.net for listening to the shows, Rebelly TV on YouTube and on Twitch. Catch us live with all of our streams. Do all the things, like, share, subscribe. Until next time, hasta los huevos.
Broccoli is man-made.
And you fighting.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.